All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to some more online notes here. And our new units are look at the time period between the 1890 and 1920s, basically from 1890, where we're leaving off here, up to about the First World War. And we're looking at two different areas. We're looking at U.S. foreign policy. That means stuff that is happening overseas and stuff happening within the United States itself. We're going to start with the idea of imperialism. Essentially, the big question is, how does the United States become a world power? Think with the United States today. We tend to be involved in a lot of stuff all over the world, whether it be Iraq or Afghanistan, Syria, Ebola in West Africa, all those kind of things. When do we start getting involved in other countries' stuff? And this starts up at the very turn of the century in the 1890s up through about the 1920s. So our big first question is, we have to go a couple of vocabulary words before we're going too far. Two big words we're going to use here are the word annex. Annex simply means adding a piece of land to your territory. A city can annex a piece of a county. A county can annex land from another county. A country can annex land from another country to their country. If you're adding land to your country, that means you annex or you add it in. You also have the idea of colonialism. We'll talk about the idea of imperialism in class. We did that on Monday, actually. But colonialism is moving part of your population to an area you've conquered. So say if the United States took over Canada, it might mean us packing up and moving to Canada. That would be the idea of colonialism. We're kind of taking over that area and almost like moving over and moving in and living there. Now, this whole idea starts actually long before the 1890s. The first big chunk of land we add after the Civil War is after basically where's our contiguous main 48 states. I mean, that all looks the same. You know, the main 48 states looked the same before the Civil War. After the Civil War, the first big chunk we add is Alaska. Now, think about Alaska today. It's known for, its beauty, its natural resources, those kind of things. In 1867, the then Secretary of State, William H. Seward, who the Secretary of State's job is to do all the foreign policy stuff, those kind of things. Seward is up there talking to Russia. Russia has this problem. They have this big chunk of land called Alaska, and they actually want to get rid of it. Their big fear, actually, is that Britain's going to take Alaska over and use it against them at some point. And so their main job is to get rid of it and make as much money off of it as possible. So Russia, creates this big bidding war about Alaska. They try to get rid of it for the best price they can. In the end, William H. Seward says the United States will pay $7.2 million. That's $7.2 million, 1867 money, for Alaska. Now understand this, guys. Alaska is 586,000 square miles. That is a huge, huge, huge piece of land. They literally paid less than 2 cents an acre for all of Alaska. Now, today you're thinking, oh my God, it's the greatest deal in the world. You know what I mean? It's like shopping the clearance rack and finding designer clothes. At the time, though, it was not viewed that way. At the time, they made fun of William H. Seward. They thought he was the biggest idiot ever found in the government. They nicknamed Alaska things like Seward's Folly and Seward's Icebox. So they thought there was nothing up there but, of Native Americans, polar bears, and snow. But later on, we found that Alaska is much more valuable than that. The biggest thing for Alaska, obviously, was the Klondike Gold Rush in the 1890s. That was huge. Top it off, later on then, oil is discovered in Alaska as well. And today, Alaska has the biggest oil reserve we use, kind of our emergency oil reserves, are located up in Alaska as well. And so all those kind of things play a role in why the importance of Alaska as we start expanding our territory. Now, we left off our first unit with the election of William McKinley. William McKinley is the president for a big part of this era of imperialization and expanding. Now, understand this, guys, that when McKinley got elected, here's his little campaign poster down here. He's up there with a little hat and his flag about prosperity. At home, prestige abroad. So at home, we want to be super, 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 like, successful at home, okay? The idea of commerce here. You want to make sure business went well here at home. We also want to be prestige abroad. The other part he talked about was making the United States a little more well-known around the world. And so in country, he wanted to revive business, fix the economy, and basically he said every single person is going to get rich, is what he said. And for the most part, he did that. And one of the big ways he did that were through tariffs. Tariffs were taxed on imported items. Now, all these imports were coming into the United States. And the question is, why do you put a tax on imports? Usually you want to have goods coming in the United States. That'd be a good thing. I mean, goods from Britain and Europe and all over the place. Well, why? Well, a lot of times foreign goods can be sold at a lower price. Think like Chinese goods or goods from Korea and Vietnam today. They're sold at a lower price because they can be made more cheaply. Well, if Americans that normally will buy the lower price good. So we have, say British steel at $5 a ton. We have American steel at $7 a ton. We're going to buy the British steel. It's just cheaper. That then means that American-made goods aren't going to be purchased. And he wanted to help those American companies out. So he slaps all these tariffs, or helps Congress to slap all these tariffs on foreign goods. So he might slap a $3 tariff on British steel. Now, the Brits got to raise their price up. Now it's at $5 a ton. We have to slap a $3 a ton tax on top of it. Now we're paying $8 a ton for British steel, and we're paying $7 a ton for U.S. steel. People buy the U.S. steel. It's kind of the tariffs were to help businesses, and they really did. Also, the idea of gold and silver. Think back to that gold standard debate we talked about in class. The whole idea of the Wizard of Oz. Which one McKinley won again? He wanted gold. That's right. By 1900, he had finally gotten that gold standard. And they published this gold standard. They say that paper money can only be traded for gold, and basically silver is basically worthless. And essentially, if you traded in $1, okay, one paper dollar got you 25.8 grams of gold. They actually measured the whole thing out. So you see that you have bills like this now that would say $20 in gold coin, payable to the bearer on demand. And so this is what the new kind of coin, new kind of dollar bill you had. It was basically saying, yeah, this 20 I have is worth, 20 times 25.8 grams of gold. That's kind of how that we'll all figure out that way. And the other thing that McKinley wanted to do was start expanding the country. Now, this already started happening a little bit before he got into office, in the 1890s and in 1867, obviously. But McKinley mentions the idea of manifest destiny in his inauguration speech. He basically says that not only are we taking over our land now, but we're so awesome and we're so great, we should be spreading our ideas everywhere else in the world. As we see the United States start getting involved in different places like the Caribbean, like the Philippines, like Hawaii. And in fact, one of the first big places we add after Alaska is Hawaii in 1898 as an official territory. Now here's how the whole thing goes down here. Why do the United States want to expand? Well, the biggest thing is compete with other places in the world. Britain has this huge empire. France is a big empire, okay? And we're afraid that other places are going to fall underneath what's called a sphere of influence. Basically, how are these European countries influencing all these other places in the world? And one of the reasons we want to get Hawaii right away is that we're afraid Hawaii was going to come under another country's influence, like France or Britain, whatever. We want to build up our naval power. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, 1890s, we have the 5th largest navy in the world. Well, we're kind of far away from a lot of different places, so we need places to refuel our ships. At this time, ships ran on coal. And so you need to stop every so often to refill your ship with coal, like you gotta do with your car of gas. So Admiral Mahan, the guy who was in charge of the United States Navy, knew that the United States needed coaling stations all around the world. Well, one good place for that would be Hawaii. We need places to sell our stuff too, increase our markets. Think about it. We're making all this great machinery, all this great stuff in the United States, all these great products. We need a place to sell our stuff. And so we want to try to expand that way. Also, we want to bring our ideas to less fortunate people. In class, we're going to talk about the white man's burden, it was called. And that's the basic idea that it's our job as, European Anglo-Americans to spread our government, to spread our religion to other places in the world. And we kind of believe that too when it comes to places like the Caribbean, Hawaii, and those kind of areas. So how does this whole start up? Well, in terms of Hawaii, obviously we think of Hawaii as this great vacation destination. We think of it as a place for recreation, all those kind of things. But originally, Hawaii was its own independent country, and actually, the United States first acquired a little section of Hawaii on the Big Island called Pearl Harbor. And obviously, Pearl Harbor is famous now because of World War II. But originally, Pearl Harbor was considered to be the best harbor, natural harbor, safest place for ships in Hawaii. And it was brought in as a refueling station. We had another one at a place called Midway Island, which would come into a play in World War II as well, but this was a lot closer to the United States, so it was easier for our ships to get from the west coast of the U.S. to Japan and China and so on and so forth. The other thing we want to do here is that the McKinley Tariff Act came about in 1890. At this time, McKinley was a senator. He was in Congress at this time, and a governor, and he wanted to basically, he could propose this tariff that we're going to see changes in how sugar is done. So one of the big changes here was that sugar would have a tariff on it. Foreign sugar coming in. Sugar from the Caribbean, sugar from Hawaii would have a tax on it. Well, all these sugar plantations that were in Hawaii were actually being run by Americans. Americans owned all these sugar plantations in Hawaii. And so we see kind of this issue of, well, what are we going to do? What can we do? And so these plantation owners in Hawaii that were owned by Americans started getting upset. They owned both, almost all the sugar plantations in Hawaii, in Cuba, in the Caribbean were owned by U.S. guys. And so in Hawaii, these people start talking about annexation. Well, what if we add Hawaii to the U.S.? That way we can get away from paying off this tariff. And so plantation owners started kind of talking to the Hawaiian government about, well, maybe you should join the United States so that we can save some money. Well, this time the king of Hawaii was a guy named King Kalakaua, who was basically forced by his owners to change the constitution. Basically, it was changed so that only wealthy landowners could vote. Well, that means most of the average Hawaiians who worked on these plantations couldn't vote anymore. Instead, it was just all the rich owners, basically, of these plantations could vote, and that was it. So the regular Hawaiian person didn't have a say in stuff anymore. Kalakaua died in 1891, and now his sister, Liliuokalani, took over instead. And so she's kind of thrust this issue of you have these planters that want to annex. She's a new queen coming into power. What's going to happen? Well, she was a nationalist. She believed in Hawaii for Hawaiians, not for Americans. And so she really fought to change the Constitution back. That the issue that the power would not be with the rich American landowners, but instead power would be with the Hawaiian people instead. And so in 1893, the U.S. government minister of Hawaii, a guy named John Stevens, actually brought in the United States Marines. He brought in a ship, USS Pennsylvania, and U.S. Marines to actually intimidate her, basically bully her, if you will, into changing the Constitution back. Well, in the end, it finally works. The U.S. ended up setting up she ends up resigning due to this pressure to a group called the Committee of Safety. Basically, these were a bunch of these rich landowners led by a guy named Sanford B. Dole. That's a guy right here with the awesome beard. He's the cousin of James Dole, who ran the Dole Pineapple Company, his cousin. It's of this big provisional government, essentially. So this new Committee of Safety takes over, and they're basically going to take over Hawaii from the Queen. And it's only the white guys that are really making the decisions, not necessarily the indigenous people, that being the people who live, the native Hawaiians. And in the end, Hawaii is set up as a American territory. So essentially, we kind of, in a way, these landowners kind of bully Hawaii away from the Hawaiians. Now, the president, when this whole thing goes down, is Grover Cleveland, even before McKinley comes to power. And he writes this quote about the annexation of Hawaii. He writes that, "Substantial wrong has thus been done, which a due regard for our national character as well as the rights of the injured people requires we should endeavor to repair the monarchy." Essentially, all this is happening, and the U.S. president at the time, Grover Cleveland, the guy before McKinley, is like, yeah, we screwed up, we should really fix this. But it ends up being a lot of debate now in the United States at this time then about the idea of imperialism. Should we keep growing? Should we not grow? Should we keep Hawaii? Should we not keep Hawaii? And eventually we see Hawaii become annexed 5 years later in 1898 by the United States and become a U.S. territory. And then eventually becomes our last state, or 50th state, in 1954. This is still very, very touchy to a lot of Hawaiians yet. I had a professor who was half Japanese, half Hawaiian. And even for his mother yet and his father, this is a very, very touchy subject because they lived in Hawaii. And even in Hawaii today, kind of some relationships between the white settlers and the native Hawaiians is a little touchy yet. That's where we leave off our notes for today, guys. Please make sure you are done for Wednesday. We'll be doing a little activity with this, actually kind of doing a mock trial about the annexation of Hawaii, and we'll also get into some reading about what really went down in Hawaii. Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it. We'll see you later.